Hey friends, it's me, Nova, and I'm going to be ranting to you about a few things. Today's topic is authority, because people keep bringing up authority, but their fucking definition is useless. Okay, I don't mean to be like that, but really, you gotta have, like, okay, as an anarchist, I believe you really just have to have a useful definition of authority. And, so I have my own that I use a lot, which is to say that authority is an ongoing relationship of domination. Uh, Authority is an ongoing relationship of domination colored by violence and coercion for the purpose of an agent, that being the authority, to direct a subject, that being the authority's victim. So what we have here is not an incident, which is one way that people often get mixed up, including freaking Frederick Engels, who had he did this whole pamphlet on authority, which is garbage, because he has this very incidental, momentary passing, non-structural approach to authority, which, let's be real, just exists to justify his own position and that of Marx. So, within my framework, it should be recognized that authority is a structure. Authority doesn't happen in a moment, it's not a thing you do, it's a structure that exists. And in particular, it's one that is socially constructed. That is to say, built by our society. Where the fuck did I just drop that shit? Which is to say, it is constructed by our society. A social construct, people get mixed up. Some people think it means it's fake. It's not fake. It's real. It's real, like having to stop for a stoplight is real. You don't, red doesn't objectively mean stop, but we all agreed that when there's a red light, we stop so we don't hit each other. So this is like, how did I get onto that? Social constructs, right. So authority is a social construct. It's a relationship that is built by the way we interact in society. That means that no one in particular has inborn traits of authority. Certainly there are some traits that would make or could help people be more successful at being an authority. For instance, not backing down easily, persistence, a propensity for violence, or charisma. But none of this particularly means that you will become an authority, just that it would be easier for you to be one. What is wrong with authority, then? Well, nothing if you're the authority, but me personally, I don't think I've ever been an authority. If I have been, not a very powerful one. And I don't like being subjected. I like interactions with other people, for sure. I like entering into cooperative agreements. I believe in a form of collectivism, which isn't to say I dismiss the need to examine the individual, but that I recognize that our society is something of a collective project, for better or worse, and that it's very misleading to reduce everything to a singular individual problem. Like, for instance, saying that not being able to get a job is someone's individual responsibility and failing. Which, given the system we're in, isn't quite true, since we all agree that at least 3% of the population is going to be unemployed at any given time. So, that's a structural issue. Again, coming back to structuralism, this sort of approaching systems in society as constructed as these sort of monoliths that we've built up over time. So, getting back to authority, examples. Oh, and as well, you don't have to actually be an individual agent. Agency can be authority can be carried out by a class. I messed this whole thing up. Authority! 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 Okay. Okay. Authority. It's bad. As an anarchist, I stand against all authority. I've seen some anarchists on YouTube and around the internet say, well, I only disapprove of unjustifiable authority. Sorry, that wasn't a impression of anyone in particular. There's a lot of now I've seen a lot of anarchists on YouTube say, I only disapprove of unjustifiable authority. But in the way that I define authority, no authority is justifiable. And I think, I mean, I understand what they're trying to do in putting the burden of proof on authorities themselves to prove that they're useful, but this ignores a whole power dynamic where they don't actually have to prove that they're useful to us. They just, get their cops to knock us on the head a bit. So, when we talk about, for instance, individual acts, say where a child runs into the street and their parent plucks them up and stops them from being hit by a car. That's not authority. I mean, certainly you've used force, and you haven't consulted with the child, but in the case of an emergency, that's not really saying, I veto your decision. It's saving you from imminent danger, which, I mean, if I was walking down the street and I saw someone texting and about to be hit by a car and I pushed him out of the way, that's not authority. That's just me saving someone's life. I haven't entered into a continuing relationship in which I constantly dominate this person. I haven't subjected them to violence and coercion, unless you count me pushing them out of the way of the even larger threat. And sure, that might hurt them, but that wasn't the point. It wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a case of discipline, which is the important thing. That violence under authority is carried out for the purpose of discipline. This is to say, for the purpose of building the habit of obedience. And that's the important bit. Authorities are authoritative because they want obedience from their subjects. Not just to save them or to help them. I mean, and there's another example that's often given of expertise. I don't think expertise is authority. In my opinion, it's simply not the same thing. It's in the case of an expert, you find someone who is knowledgeable, and that's why they are able to tell you things. But you are not actually ever required to follow the recommendations of an expert. You don't actually have to listen to them or face punishment. You don't get disciplined for failing unless you've agreed to enter that kind of situation. This gets a little tricky, though, because we have people like these ANCAP voluntarists who say, well, of course, then going to your job, as long as you're not literally held at gunpoint, is non-authoritative. It's the corporation is not authority, which is bullshit, because there's another that comes back to the concept of authority being structural. And this is something Foucault talks about, which the ever brilliant Philosophy Tube YouTube channel covers, which is the panopticon, structural authority as demonstrated by the panopticon. In the panopticon, to sum up, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's a thought experiment in which the philosopher, whose name escapes me, imagined a prison in which there's a tower in the center that can see into every cell. But the people in the cells can't see back into the tower. They just know that the tower can see them, potentially. They wouldn't have to be watched all the time because they think they're being watched, or could possibly be watched at any moment. And it was theorized that they would behave themselves because of this. Is that authority? You're not literally going out there to beat them over the head, though technically that threat is kept on the back burner, which is exactly where the authority comes in, because you don't actually need the presence of coercion and force. You just need the threat. And that's why discipline and obedience can actually cover up the existence of authority. Because if we go back to our example of our job, our boss, can't exactly beat us over the head with a stick, but he can fire us. And if we can't find a new job, which isn't guaranteed to us, the policeman will show up and evict us from our house. If we try to take food from the store without the proper balance on our cards or in our wallets, then the policeman will come and beat us up, throw us in a cage. If we just go out in the middle of the woods and try to live there, the park rangers will find us and tell us to get the fuck out. It's not a voluntary society. There's nowhere you could go that this society can't find you, and unless that place is extremely unpleasant to begin with, like Antarctica. I'm not gonna live off penguin for the rest of my life just because some asshole wants to turn me into a wage slave. So, while the boss might not be able to kick your ass, he can put you in the position where you're gonna get your ass kicked and then thrown in a cage where they'll make you work anyway. So, this leads us to a position of indirect authority or structural authority or domination, you might say, in which the status quo is accepted or at least seen as not something we can easily overthrow. So even in, say, the case of quite a few anarchists, many of us still have jobs because, we may not accept that this authority of the bosses is just, but we can, we might not accept that this authority of the bosses is just, but there's nothing else we can do without facing punishment and discipline. And punishment's not the only kind of discipline. Reward can be a kind of discipline too. The promotion that a worker gets being held over their head like a carrot on a stick, and the whip being kept in case someone tries to challenge those habits of obedience. This means that A, authority is not always visible, but B, authority exists for the reason of exploitation, and C, you don't have the choice when there's an authority in your life to say no without consequence, and that's what makes them so pernicious. In the case of, say, my karate instructor or something like that, I go to his class, he holds out rewards for, or maybe not rewards, but places of it, or ways to advance, to feel pride and self-respect and so on. But I could quit and not be punished. And so he's not an authority, he's just an expert that I've decided to listen to. And I'm subjecting myself to his, or hers or theirs, expertise and advice for the purpose of advancing myself, for reaching my goals, because I trust them. And this is a big place where trust and expertise, or authority and expertise, diverge. Is authority is based on fear and, to a certain degree, also the desire to please the authority, to placate them. And whereas listening to expertise is motivated mostly by trust and personal desire. For instance, I wouldn't join up with a karate class if I didn't want to learn karate. So it's got a lot to do with my personal desire, what I'm trying to achieve, what I'd like to do. This ultimately sort of sums up why I don't believe in any kind of authority, and why I am strictly anti-authoritarian, particularly an anarchist. And I'll actually talk about anarchism next time, but I've ranted at this camera long enough for sure. In any case, peace. More like this coming soon. Like and subscribe if you like that shit. Hit that little bell thing. Think it's a good thing. Leave a comment, but not a mean one, or else I'll find you. I'll fucking find you. Until next time, see you around.